Hey, welcome back. We ended our last uh, video discussion on um, rising tension between the colonists and Great Britain over how Great Britain was trying to raise revenue. Um, and the colonists weren't liking these new taxes. They were really upset by this. And they started to organize protests. And Boston, we had the Sons of Liberty. The House of Burgesses in Virginia was saying, only we have the power to tax residents of Virginia. So we're going to start to see greater amount of organization, and the area in which this is really spreading and as popular is in Massachusetts. So we're looking at this as the trouble in Massachusetts. Some background: tax protests were increasing. Britain was sending larger number of troops to Boston to maintain control. Tensions are really rising though. In March 1770, townspeople were acting out against the soldiers. They were, we had some snow on the ground. They were forming up snowballs. They were throwing them at the soldiers. There's rocks and stuff in the snowballs. The soldiers are upset about this. They're trying to control the crowd, and they end up firing into the crowd. Different sources give some varying numbers here. Um, I've read where it's three. I believe the textbook is saying five. Five colonists are killed. The one name that always stands out to us, though, is Crispus Attucks. Um, and we see something called uh, propaganda. Propaganda is being used. Bostonians use the term the Boston Massacre. Okay, news is going to start to spread. Colonial leaders use the deaths as propaganda. The calls for boycotting British goods increase. Britain responds by, hey, okay, we'll dial it down. We'll repeal the Townshend Acts, but we're going to keep the tax on tea. We got to tax the tea. We know you folks buy a ton of that, and we're going to make some of our money. Groups called the Committees of Correspondence are formed, and they're used to spread news. So, kind of a back in the day or connection to today, this would be considered using social media to spread news, so that they're letter writing campaigns to make sure that everyone along the eastern seaboard within the colonies, the people that need to know, are getting the information to find out about these protests. So propaganda then is where you're basically kind of spinning a message to support your side of the argument. You narrow in on one small item, right? And um, you turn it into this big thing. And so an example of this, World War II, the United States wanted to conserve oil and gas for the war effort, so they were really stressing that people should carpool. And then they were saying, hey, if you're going to choose to ride alone, it's as if you're riding with Adolf Hitler. So they wanted to play on emotion. Um, Colors can be used to do this. We saw this with uh, President Obama's first election run to the presidency. Just it can send a singular message. So propaganda doesn't have to be always negative. It can try and spread a positive message too. Here, this one, it's pretty basic: hope, right? And within that, though, we see the red, white, and blue. We want to have hope for the country. This is who we need to elect as president. The next couple I'm going to show reference some science fiction movies, Star Wars and Star Trek. I use those because I like those movies. So this one, join Starfleet today, and then they have, which would be Klingon here. You know, you're planning on getting other people to join too. You see four people who are very proud. The chests are puffed out, and you know this is the thing to do. If you want to be supportive, you need to join Starfleet today. This one goes back to Star Wars. Vote Leah first Senate. Protect the Republic, and Leah's going to do that for us. And then the last one here, stand against tyranny. Join the Rebel Alliance today. So if we want to knock tyranny out, you need to join the Rebel Alliance. Like I said, I just use those because I like Star Wars and Star Trek. So, but I think it really gets across the point. So in your notes, then I would like you to create a picture which shows support for the Colonists' actions regarding the Boston Massacre, and we want to, keep in mind they were calling this a massacre, but it was basically a street fight that occurred between a patriot mob throwing snowballs, stones, sticks at this squad of British soldiers. Several of the colonists were killed, and this led to a campaign by speechwriters they're trying to drum up support and raise the anger, or ire is the word that's used, of the citizens. So immediately Crispus Attucks dies, and then two others, they're shot and they die later, and then there were 6 others that lived through the wounds. But so in your notes then, really look to create something that's going to show that you understand, how propaganda is used, and have a message in there that's going to show support for their actions regarding the Boston Massacre. So now we have what people are calling, we have a crisis in Boston. Some background, like we said before, Britain kept the tax on the tea. The call for the boycotts remain, and the colonists are going to do the Tea Party, which we've all heard of. The Boston Sons of Liberty. We've mentioned the Sons of Liberty. They're a protest group. They threw out a shipment of tea that was sitting in the harbor. They threw it into the water. It wrecked it. Remember, at no point, nobody's speaking out against British rule. They still see themselves as citizens of Great Britain. They're just saying, hey, you're not listening to us, and we want our voice to be heard. Thinking about propaganda, the people back in Great Britain could technically be looking at this as, acts of terrorism. They're trying to instill upon us a fear that they're going to do some things that we're not going to like. So Britain's response then, hey, we're trying to get you in line. You're not listening. We feel like we're being nice. We repealed all the taxes except the one on tea, and now we're gonna drop the hammer on you. We're gonna coerce you. We're gonna force you to do something. So their response then to the Tea Party is the coercive acts, and again, propaganda. The colonists view them as intolerable acts. We can't tolerate these. Where from Britain's viewpoint, we're trying to get you to do what you need to do. We're trying to get you back in line. It was meant to punish the colonies. They were forced to quarter or house British soldiers, and Boston Harbor's closed. So again, we talked about thinking ahead to that Bill of Rights and what goes into there, and what they feel is unfair, and to make sure that it's something that doesn't happen again. We can go back to the quartering of soldiers. The colonists felt that this violated their rights as English citizens. They're saying, hey, we are still citizens of England, and you guys just aren't listening to us, and you're violating our rights, and it's not cool. It's not. So here's just a graphic. These are the 5 intolerable acts. The Boston Port Bill, which closed the port of Boston. You have the Quartering Act. They're going to have to let the soldiers live in their houses, and Britain's not going to pay for that. Anybody who went to trial, the trial would be in Britain. Well, you're not going to get a favorable judge or jury then. The Massachusetts Government Act, no more self-government in Boston. We're going to send somebody there to run the government for you. And then also the Quebec Act. So Britain decided that Quebec was no longer going to be an American colony. So we can X Canada off the list. We'll see you next time.